afternoon, everyone. I'm so happy to invite you all and to have you all join us for Black Women's Equal Pay Day. August 13th, it takes all that time from January 1st for Black women to get to the same point that men are at much earlier and white women are at much earlier. But before we go into our conversation, I think it's a moment for celebration this week, because I don't know about all of you, but I could not be more excited about Kamala Harris having been asked by Joe Biden to be his vice presidential candidate. I don't know about you, but I had chills yesterday when I listened to her speech, and I thought about all those little Black and brown and white girls who saw this and knew that we were looking at a brighter future. So now we just need to get them elected, and then off we go. But to give you a bit of an introduction on my interest and what I have done since 2014, when I ran for treasurer, my #1 issue was equal pay. And it was equal pay for everyone. And part of my campaign was citing the discrepancies that women, Black women, Asian women, Latino women were all suffering in this country, and that I pledged from day one to change that in the treasurer's office and use us as a leader on how you rid yourselves of the wage gap. Not only that, but I pledged for intentional diversity. And that means hiring from the highest levels to the lowest levels, a completely diverse group of people, and giving everyone the opportunity to advance at the same pay. So we started that off from the very beginning, and I'm happy to say we've been really successful at it. And it is every possibility in the world to get that done if you just set your mind to it. We didn't wait for an equal pay law, we did it. Now, admittedly, I had a great mentor, the go-to person on who wrote the book on equal pay, Evelyn Murphy. So I knew what to look for. I knew to do an internal audit on our organization, and that would expose what was going on. I knew that when people were applying for jobs, if they had suffered a wage gap, they were going to only ask for a little bit more money than what they were already making. But we looked at our job classifications, we set what those jobs were worth, and no matter how the person walked in, they were paid what the job was worth. So I'm excited about this celebration with you. Let's look toward not needing an August 13th in order to celebrate together. And I am very happy to turn this over to Alethea Harney, who works in my office, who is a dear friend and colleague. Alethea, take it away.
Thank you so much, Treasurer. And thank you to everyone who's joining today. We have over 250 participants. We're going to have an amazing discussion. We couldn't be more excited. But first, I just want to quickly say how amazing it is to work for someone like Treasurer Goldberg. She doesn't just talk the talk, she also walks the walk. You know, many elected officials say how committed they are to pay equity, but for her to actually take the time to make sure that her office is paying people equitably, and for her to have over half of her senior leaders be women, and many of them women of color, just makes me really proud to be part of this organization. So thank you, Treasurer, for being such a great leader. So I'm going to take a quick moment to thank some of the elected officials and their teams who have taken the time to join us today. We have Attorney General Maura Healey's office. We have Mayor Yvonne Spicer's office. We have Representative Malia's office, Representative Miranda's office, Representative Farley Bovier's office, as well as representatives from the Mass Caucus of Women's Legislators. So thank you for joining us today. So we're going to kick off the panel by telling you guys a little bit about the Treasury's work on pay equity. Then we're going to show you a quick video about our newly refreshed website, equalpayma.com. Then we'll dive into our panel discussion, followed by a brief Q&A. Anyone who would like to ask a question can type their questions into the chat box throughout the webinar. So anytime something pops into your head, go ahead and just write us a question. And then we'll close with a call to action from a special guest. So that's our agenda. So then on the next slide, I'm going to tell you a little bit about the Office of Economic Empowerment, which is the first of its kind that Treasurer Goldberg started herself on day one. So the Office of Economic Empowerment and the Massachusetts Treasury is committed to doing what we can to close the wage gap in Massachusetts. Since Treasurer Goldberg took office in 2015, we've hosted wage equality roundtables, salary negotiation workshops across the state, and launched a state-of-the-art website full of digital tools for residents and employers to make pay equity a priority in their work lives. This summer, we gave our Equal Pay MA website a makeover. My colleague Shaitia is going to play a quick clip that gives you a glimpse of the final product. All right. Thank you, Shaitia. And a big shout out to the Office of Economic Empowerment for your great work. So without further ado, let's dive into the panel discussion. Here's a quick overview of who is joining us today. First, we have Miss Danella Clark. She's the first Black woman to serve as chair of the Massachusetts Commission on the Status of Women. She also serves as the chief executive officer of the Boston Arts Academy Foundation. Daniela has over 3 decades of leadership experience working and serving on the boards of some of New England's most prominent nonprofits. So thank you for joining us, Ms. Clark. We also have joining us today, Ms. Shirley Edgerton. Shirley is an educator, leader, and community activist, and currently serves as the cultural proficiency coach for Pittsfield Public Schools. She's also the director of Youth Alive Performing Arts, co-founder of the Lift Every Voice Festival, a member of the executive committee of the NAACP, and founder and director of the Rites of Passage and Empowerment Program. Not busy at all. Last but certainly not least, we have Ms. Tammy Wertham. Tammy is Vice President, Human Resources for Sun Life US, where she oversees strategic human resource professionals and focuses on business growth, enhancing employee experience, and attracting talent. Tammy also serves on the board of the Women's Fund of Western Massachusetts. So why don't we go ahead and kick off with the first question. The first question is for Danella. Danella, can you please tell us a little bit more about the wage gap and why it tends to be so wide for Black women in particular?
Thank you. Thank you for the question, and thank you so much for having me. So, you know, there's different numbers floating around, but the one I'm going to use today is comes from the National Women's Law Center that says for every dollar a white man earns, a Black woman earns 58 cents on that dollar. And, you know, when I think about me, myself being a Black mother, 80% of Black households, Black women are either the co or in most cases, the sole breadwinner. And if you think about a Black woman's lifetime of professional work, it will take us anywhere from 18 months to 2 years just to make up that dollar. And over the lifespan of a Black woman's career, we lose out on anywhere from $1 million and higher. And so when you look at these numbers, I really have to applaud the work of Treasurer Goldberg, what she is doing. And also, one of the proudest days for me as a commissioner was on August 1st, 2016, when Governor Baker signed into law gender equity. But that law went into effect on July 1st, 2018. And today, 2 years later, in the Commonwealth, according to our data, Black women in the Commonwealth as of today are 62 cents on the dollar. So we have a tremendous amount of work to do.
Absolutely. Danella, could you tell us a little bit about that legislation and some of the successes in it?
Well, I mean, as I said, the legislation went into effect July 1st, 2018. I think some of the success is the great work that the Treasurer's Office has done in terms of helping women to understand our rights, to help us with salary negotiations, and to really amplify. I remember going around with even Mayor Walsh, and as a commissioner going to what we call the South Coast Fall River and all the way to the western part of the state, really helping people to understand the legislation and what can and cannot be asked during interviews. So that's some of the things that I've seen that has changed in just a short period of time.
That's awesome. So next, I'd like to hear from all of the panelists on this one. We're going to get a little personal. We'd like to hear a little bit about some of the challenges that you've maybe faced before in the workplace regarding pay. And we'd love to hear some of the strategies, resources, or tools that you've used and what others can use to help narrow that pay gap. So why don't we start with Shirley?
Hey. It's a pleasure to be here today and to be involved in this conversation. And so in terms of a personal experience, I would like to share a story of my first move into management. I applied for a position after some encouragement and obtained the position, did not negotiate over the salary because unfortunately I didn't have that knowledge and understanding. But in my case, I was fortunate to have a white male ally who was in a senior management position. And he had a conversation with me and quickly instructed me in the process and the fact that I was very much worthy of a salary that I had not even contemplating in asking. Mm-hmm. So because of his guidance and because he was a role model for me in management, I was able to return to the table and negotiate a salary that was much more equal to what my male counterparts had in that management position.
Excellent. Thank you for sharing. How about Tammy?
Hello, everyone. Thanks so much for having me. I had a little bit of pink on today, matching with the theater. So I wish that I was as good as Shirley. So let me take you a little bit back, and I'm going to have the opportunity to give you two perspectives. So you heard a little bit about my role, right? The dreaded HR. Right? So HR has the ability in private sector to be able to be really heavily involved with pay equity, right? So I'll talk to you a little bit about that in a minute, but why not get to know me? I'm here, let's do it. So what I will tell you is when I started in corporate America many, many years ago, similar to Shirley, I had no idea. I didn't know what I didn't know. And I knew, though, when someone offered me a role, I immediately felt this crazy feeling of, thank you so much for hiring me. I'm nuts. Why would I think that? Thank you for hiring me. But I had this sentiment of, hey, this is great. This is a great place to start. And I almost believed in my heart that equity already was there. It existed. Of course, I'm doing the same job as this guy over here. It's already the same. I shouldn't worry about it. And then as time went on, I started to realize that things were a little bit different. One of the first things that I did is I started looking at my own salary as someone described it to me the other day as personal best. So as long as I was making more than I was before, I was somehow advancing, right? So if you think about that, well, I was making some this yesterday, I'm making this today, so all is good in the Wertham household. But I never stopped for a minute to say, wait a minute, is this truly equitable? Is
Right.
this a way in which what is existing systematically that may be impacting what I'm thinking, right? So, of course, when someone asked me my salary, I told them, and I was happy. In most cases, they offered me more. Now, did I know there was much more? Maybe 38% more that I didn't ask for? Yes, I did not know that. So this is something that's really, really critical. You all are here on this call, all 250 of us friends are doing the best first step, which is a level of awareness, right? Recognizing that it isn't one person's evil plot in the back room to pay you less. It is a result of systematic issues, right? So there are a lot of things that companies can do, and I'll speak specifically about mine, why not, to talk about how we're addressing the wage, the gaps. So first of all, one of the things that's super critical, and you already heard this from Treasurer Goldberg, say something about making compensation decisions based on roles, skills, experience, etc. Notice how I didn't say what you previously made, right? So this is going to be super critical. Even as we move forward to the future of work, we're going to start to be valued based on what our skills and experiences are. So we should start knowing the value of those, okay? So I always say to you, while I'm busy, sometimes watching Insecure or Real Housewives or whatever I'm doing with my Black Girl Magic time, although 90 Day Fiancé is not too bad, people, check that out. Anyway, I could be spending more time researching what I'm worth, researching what I need to do, how to negotiate, utilizing resources that are available to me. I could be doing more of that. The other thing that companies are doing, you heard a little bit of it, and our company is for sure doing it, is do not ask for what your prior salary is. We do not do that at Sunlight. What we ask for are, what are your salary expectations? Very different.
The dreaded question, Tammy.
Right? No, don't ask that. But this is how you educate yourself, right? You gotta have something there to go with, right?
Yeah.
Always negotiate. I know that sounds weird. This idea of negotiating, when do I stop? Is this the right feeling? We'll talk more about that in a minute. But then also for us as a company, compensation is a moving target. Skills become more valuable and different roles become more valuable. So don't lock yourself into one story as a company. What we want to do is create the repeatable processes where we're constantly evaluating our gender pay equity, our equity related to underrepresented minority groups, and we're looking every day to make sure that that's part of who we are as a company. So I feel very grateful to be part of a company that's helping drive these efforts, living these efforts, but I'm also just Tammy Wertham, who during the beginning of trying to get into this corporate career didn't realize that I didn't do it right all the time. And I wasn't aware of all the resources that are available to me. So we're going to hear a lot about that today. And I'm excited to be here to give you a little bit of advice, but I could probably tell you more about the mistakes I made rather than the things I always did. You all are doing something that at my age, long ago in my early career, I didn't have the wherewithal to do. And the last thing that I will say, you'll hear me say it again, don't apologize for asking for more. Stop it. Stop apologizing. It is not a bad thing to say, I need to understand what I'm worth. I understand what I'm bringing to the table. Do not think that you are then going to be stigmatized for someone that wants to understand and valued for what you bring to the table. All right, I'll be quiet now.
No, thank you. That's helpful, Tammy, because I know that oftentimes we want to ask for more, but we're afraid that that's going to negatively impact us. So it's good to hear from an HR professional at a top company that it is okay to ask.
It is.
Thank you. Thank you. All right, Danella, can you please tell us about maybe a personal obstacle that you faced regarding pay and maybe how you overcame that?
No, I'm similar to Shirley in that I've always had really good allies. I remember 22 years ago when I started working at, it was then Demick Community Health Center, now the Demick Center, first foray into philanthropy. And Jackie Jenkins Scott, who remains my shero, one of my professional mentors, I negotiated a salary, and part of my salary was a bonus, and my boss was a white female. So again, I applaud the work that Treasurer Goldberg is doing as a white woman. And I have to tell you all, this was like a defining moment in my career and also in my relationship with Jackie these many years later. So part of my salary was, I got a $10,000 bonus if I had met my revenue goals, and I had done this. And I had gone to my white female boss, not once, not twice, but 3 times, to ask her for my bonus. And it had just come a point where I was like, you know what, I'm just gonna leave here. And I happened to be sitting in my office one day, and I was probably 3 layers below Jackie, Black woman, CEO. And Jackie came to me and she said, you know, you seem down, what's wrong? And I was young and afraid and said, should I say something to her? Because, you know, and I told her, and I'll tell you, I'll never forget it. It was a Thursday in the fall. It was dark. I continued to lead with integrity and had a strong work ethic. And that woman went and not only signed the check request, but she called the head of HR, she called the CFO who was still there, and I believe personnel, she didn't tell me, reprimanded my boss. That next Friday morning, not only was my bonus on my desk, there was a bit of an increase, and 9 years later, it didn't take 9 years, but many years into it, I was the first ever and the youngest to lead the philanthropy office there at Demick. So that was a defining moment for me in terms of a Black woman advocating for you. Here I had a white woman not doing the right thing. So it has informed me in my own management and leadership of people. And then in the current position that I'm in, there is only one other position similar to mine in the city. And the gentleman who was my ally in that work, as my board was negotiating my current contract, I went to this white man and I said, hey, what are you being paid? And not only did he tell me what he was being paid, as my executive committee was doing their due diligence, he actually shared his contract. And then yet again with allies, I am very fortunate that the chairman of my board is the great Dr. Lee Pelton, who is another phenomenal leader who leads with integrity and empathy and recognize the value of one's work. So a couple stories there in terms of when you weren't treated well, but really informed, you know, your word and how you treat people. But to your point, Tammy, also, as again, the current role I'm in, doing my due diligence, so whatever the board had come to me with, I was able to say, here's something similar to help with my own salary negotiations. So it's really been having really good allies and then peers in the field who are willing to share with you as well.
Excellent, excellent. And also what I'm picking up from there, Danella, is also that you weren't afraid to ask again, right? You weren't afraid to ask, okay, how much are you making? And they actually gave you more information than you were expecting. So I think.
Yeah, but I tell you, in the Jackie situation, I was gonna just leave.
Right.
You know, so because I thought
just quit.
This is not an employer of choice. We had a deal, and probably knowing me, I would have quit and did something else. But here you had a CEO who stepped in and said, this is wrong. This is not how you or we as an organization treat someone when a commitment's made and the goals have been met. But yes, you definitely, you know, the one thing I'll say about women, all women, we advocate. Ayanna Presley says this all the time, Congresswoman Presley, that, you know, the #1 job her mother was an advocate. We advocate for everybody else, but we don't advocate for ourselves. And I've raised my daughter, who's a little lawyer, just a phenomenal. I tell her what I say about myself. You have to be the CEO of, so I'm the CEO of Danella Clark Incorporated. Right. It's like, you gotta put yourself first, particularly in the work world. So,
I love that. Yep. All right, Tammy, let's go back to you. So the pandemic has put additional pressure on all of us, but it's been said that women in particular have taken on additional burdens. I'm sure some of us on this call are familiar with that. How do you think the pandemic will affect work culture in the long run? And do you think it will influence the pay gap one way or another?
Ooh, that's a hard question because I don't think anyone knows the answer, right, of what the future has to hold. But I will say it's clear from all the data that we see out there, what we're talking about today has the potential of being magnified, right, in the post-COVID world. Obviously, because of the roles that are predominantly filled by women, right? The treasurer knows that, and the impact of COVID on those roles could lead to perpetuating challenges for women in this space, right? In the space of having that pay equity. So it continues to be something that we have to work towards, as well as getting the legislation, the support, company buy-in to be able to address gender pay equity once and for all. It's not something that in and of itself will be that it'll just happen. I think what we've learned though in this time of COVID and a lot of the time with racial injustice, what we've seen is when we focus on something, right? We focus on something, we can make things change, which is what the treasurer said. This is not impossible to do for us to say we're going to address this today. But I will say when we talk about the culture of work, there's been this interesting thing that's been happening as we're all on Zoom right now. I've gotten many, many notes from my employees, not only female employees, but male employees that are saying, boy, it's real difficult to work at home with kids. Well, really, it's really tough, huh? So I think what you're seeing in some ways that there's a realization in terms of the household of what women have historically been dealt with. But I will say who yells the loudest? The men. They're the ones, I can't take this. This is too much. And yet for women, they feel like, well, you know, I guess I should expect that this is going to be a little harder, right? But the men won't tolerate it. No. I've got some things to do. What are you going to do to help support? So even for us as a company, one of the big things that we're focusing on right now is how to support our parents, right? How to support our parents in the workplace. And inadvertently, as we heard beautifully from Danella, around the 81% of Black female households, right, are single parent households. So when you focus on families, as we do as a company, and as we do with our benefits, you inevitably focus on working on and improving that aspect of people's lives. Focusing on pay equity is focusing on families. And I think it's a wonderful, wonderful thing that we look at it that way. So taking care of our employees holistically, but understanding where those pressures are going to come are going to be critical. But the pandemic, at least in the short term, will exacerbate some of those challenges. That just means we have to work harder. And we're not afraid of hard work, right? That's not it. We're not afraid of that. We just need to focus on it today. And I love Danella's comments around being the CEO of you, right? No one's going to want it more than you. If you're going to go out in the universe and say, well, I want a company who's just going to say I'm great, you have got to want it more than anyone else. And want it meaning I want to be paid for what I deserve and what skills I bring to the table. It's interesting because I did see, and I don't know if Danella, you saw a stat that said, even though we're asking for more, we're not getting the promotions, right, as often. There actually was a statistic that said, we actually ask for promotions more than men do. Who knew? But guess what? This is what happens a lot of times. My personal opinion is that once we hear the opportunity for development, we say, oh, let me go back. And once I have all of those things checked, I'm going to come back to you. And guess what? Here's the promo. Where the guy looks at it and says, I'm 70% there.
Right. I can do it.
Right. I can do it. I can figure it out. So what we have to understand is, you know what? It's not about me being perfect. It's about me having the skills and competencies and ability to be able to perform this role at a top notch. And in many cases, bring in the diversity at the table as a woman, as a Black. So that's an extra added cultural ad, I tell you, a cultural ad that you should pay for. Oh, sorry. I got a little out of my skis. Sorry if my team is on the call.
I want to jump in on this question.
Yeah, go ahead. Go ahead, Danella.
So, because I had a young woman just come and 2 small kids ask me the same question. I think, again, you know, yes, it could increase the gap, but as women, we know how to show our value. I think when you're in this crisis, one, you have to communicate a lot. If you have a good boss or a good employer, you could go to your employer and say, look, this is a challenge. If you're an exempt employee, this is how I'm going to make up my work. Nights and weekends, it's to be expected. Or if you can't, and I'm all about family first, then you say, you know what, I'm going to take advantage of the FFCRA. the Federal Family Act. It doesn't mean, there is nothing stronger than a comeback than a setback. I am all about you put your family first, but I was talking to Lee Pelton about this recently. The problem with this crisis, right, is it's never ending, it feels like, but it will end. And there is hope. But I think as women, we just have to figure out, working with our employers, how do we get our work done? How do we constantly communicate in a pandemic, whether it's on Zoom or whatever, so that as decisions potentially are going to be made in the company, that the company still understands your value, even though they may not be seeing you there from 9 to 5. So communicate. And if you do need to take a break or to take a leave, then I think that women should do that, because our families should ultimately come first. But again, if you're the CEO of yourself, then advocate and figure out, how can I do my job and take care of my family?
Yep. Shirley, I'm curious your thoughts on how we can uplift women and young girls during this time, during this pandemic.
Well, as the director of the Rites of Passage and Empowerment Program for Girls, this is absolutely a conversation that we engage in on a regular basis. And so in education, awareness is critically important when we talk about educating our young women and educating ourselves. So when we're in the work world, we will have these skills and abilities and the confidence and to believe that we truly are worthy of these financial advances. So I think it's, I'm noticing some of the questions that are coming in, and great questions. But I really do believe, the intersection of race and sex, clearly gender clearly plays in the experiences that we're having as women of color in the workplace. And so I think in terms of what's happening in the COVID experience, and all of a sudden now people more are becoming aware of the the inequalities, in economically, socially, whatever it may be, that we can take advantage of this situation and educate folks and let them know, though you think this is a new experience, the pay gaps, no, this is historical. This is very much historical for women of color. And it's an opportunity for what you're doing today is to educate the public, educate those in political position, educate those in corporate America. It's a grand opportunity. And though right now we feel like we're in the depths of it and, we're not even sure if we're going to get out of it, I see a little light, because I see a little opportunity for us to make some changes at a very critical point that we're all living right now.
I like that. Yes. Treasurer Goldberg, I know you weren't planning on jumping into the panel discussion, but I'm actually curious about your thoughts on how we can uplift people during this difficult time.
Well, I mean, there have been so many topics that have come up that I wanted to share with all of you. Some of the things that we did that helped change the paradigm right off the bat. Just want to share quickly, because I did see some of the questions that, in addition to the kind of hiring, first of all, when I hired my HR person, Tammy, it was with the knowledge and understanding that it was their role to break down all these barriers. And to address the questions about, there was a question about unions and how do you do that? Well, what we did is we did classification of jobs, and we looked for pink jobs and for blue jobs, because blue jobs have historically gotten paid more than pink jobs. And we neutralized classifications and hiring practices across that. And that applied to union positions. And so that's how I wanted to respond to that we rid ourselves of the gender-based job descriptions, which typically happen. I also put in 12 weeks paid parental leave, And if anybody tries to call it maternity leave, they don't last the day. 12 weeks paid parental leave and flex time, because we needed to support Danella, the family.
Mhm.
And during the pandemic, also I want to add in allies. Allies are critical. And that's why we support and uplift our white men who believe in the same things we do. And I'm going to tell you, when I was first running, the person who came asked me what my issue was, and I said equal pay, and it was a white blue collar worker in his working boots, and he said, that's my issue. Well, you could have knocked me over with a feather. And I said, really, why? He said, I have a wife and 3 girls. None of them are paid what they're worth, and it's all on my back. So there are allies out there who get it from personal experience, but it helps, and that they're at all levels. And then mentoring. And that I find to be a very critical role on my part. At my age and in my role, for me to stand in front of a group of young women and share with them the story of when I was 40 years old and got elected to my first office, I called my father the following morning and literally said, Daddy, do I really know how to do this job? And he went, a lot dumber people have had this job before you. And that's one of our problems. We don't self-advocate. We don't believe in ourselves. These are the cultural barriers that our empowerment programs for women, our wage negotiation workshops, our mentoring. We have a Women in Finance Fellowship because the financial services world is abysmal for women and Black women, brown women. And so what we have to do is show them that even me at 60 years old, before I went to run, had to hold my nose and jump off the high dive in order to do this, because I was so committed to making a difference in the world that we all have those feelings of doubt inside. And that you do have to hold your nose and jump off the high dive, and you will succeed. Do not let the you-know-whats get you down. I won't say that word. Begins with a B, ends with a D. But that's what my mom taught me, and that's what I hope all of us here on this call will. So during the pandemic, how do we uplift people? I think this pandemic has shown how great women are. We are the multitaskers. If you think my husband can handle this pandemic, I am not a cook. I have now done my job. I'm president of all the treasurers of the country, so I'm on with them all the time. I started cooking. I was cleaning toilets. I was vacuuming floors. I got steaming the kitchen floor and taking care of a sick dad. And I was able to get a lot more done than he was. And I've always said to the women I mentor, we work 24/7. We work 24/7. And if this pandemic hasn't shown all these guys that, boy, nothing will. However, I think that the HR directors, the heads of organizations, they're all seeing that women haven't skipped a beat because we know how to do it. And so that's how I would uplift people, by showing that we can continue on this path as long as it takes and still get our kids educated and get our houses relatively clean. I have to admit, I focused on the kitchen and the bathrooms. Little dust in the living room wouldn't bother anyone.
That's right, Trey.
Hey, it's there for show anyway, right? I think that that's the uplifting nature of this.
Yeah.
How we translate that back into the workplace, if we ever get to normalize, I'm not sure that what normal, the new normal, will look like the old normal. I think we're going to see more flexible work schedules because I think that life is going to demand that. Mm-hmm. Although I have to say, and Alethea, you may be one of them, some people may want to get away from their kids. And I want my daughter, who's moved in with us in March, to go back to her apartment soon. But you know what? It's been a difficult but fascinating time frame. And it's what I feel everyone should reflect upon. It is shown that we know how to get the job done.
Right. Absolutely. Absolutely. So one of the questions that that was submitted was regarding mentors. A bunch of you guys have talked about having a mentor or an ally. How does one go about getting one? Maybe Shirley, I'll kick that over to you since you mentioned that first.
Yes. I think when well, even prior to the idea of possibly going into management or in some type of key position, that should be part of the process when you're in high school, as far as I'm concerned. So if there's an opportunity for you to engage with a teacher or someone in the community or through an organization, for you to identify someone who have similar interests, could be background, or someone who's pursuing or in a career that you're interested in, that might be a person or woman in particular, you know, for a young girl, that you might choose to engage, you know, have a conversation with that woman. And if it feels like there's a real match there and that person is interested in becoming a mentor, then ask that person. Or if you were in the workplace already and there are some experienced workers there, and you spend some time trying to identify who people are first. You know, I wouldn't do that the first day on the job. Just check folks out, you know, in terms of their work skills and who they are as people. And again, engage them. Ask a few questions, maybe ask them out for a coffee break or tea or whatever, and begin that conversation and explore the possibility of that person becoming your mentor. And it's the same thing, I think, in terms of, you know, of allies. Like, I would have never in a million years thought to go to a white male and have some conversations, you know, with him, thinking that he would be interested in me furthering my career. It was the last thought in my mind as I entered the workplace. But that's, you know, that's also an alternative to explore.
Right.
You know, so
that's the beauty of it, right? Sometimes in unsuspecting places you can find mentors, right?
Absolutely.
Because we all have something that could potentially connect us, for
That's
sure,
right.
for sure. Tammy, did you want to weigh in on that one a little bit? There also have been a lot of questions about the salary negotiation, and if you give that number first, and then do you lowball yourself if you say too high, or you then cut out for the competition?
Yeah, that's and I definitely want to get to that. So I think that's an important piece, right? Everyone sort of believes this idea that there's sort of a book, and you go to page 37 and it says, I'm going to be the treasurer of, and you scroll over and it says, this is the role. And it's not that simple, right? But if you think about, if you wanted to spend time in researching something and trying to get as much information and asking around as you possibly could, why not have it be your daggone salary?
Right.
So
right.
No, it is not easy. I am not here to tell you that it is easy as pie, that you're going to come in and get it right every time. But you can talk to an organization about how they feel about gender pay equity. What types of things do they have in place to ensure that that's happening across their institution? This is very important to you as a person of color. No, historically, you may have been impacted by this. These are all things that show that you're joining an organization with an expectation of how you want to be paid, right? And how an expectation of how you want to be treated. All of those conversations are all valid to have. If you happen to miss the number slightly, if you're part of the right organization, guess what? The analysis will happen next year. When they go and they comp out every single person in that same role, they're like, well, Shirley, she's out here on the end of this role. She needs to be adjusted. And Shirley doesn't have to say a thing, right? That's what we do. You don't have to ask Shirley. We evaluate it, and we look and say, is this representative of who we are? How are we going to go out and say we care about gender pay equity, and you look under the covers and it doesn't happen? So we have to push ourselves. It's a moving target, right? Every year it adjusts and changes. But you want to find out what kind of practices are within an organization. Because salary negotiation doesn't only happen one time, people. It should happen all the time. You should talk about where your skills are being valued. How do you change where you're going to be? Have those discussions so that it's a constant flow. And every day you get a little bit more comfortable with it. Super, super important. So I want to talk, everyone talks about mentorship, sponsorship. It's this big discussion, especially as Black women. Like once I get that one mentor, and we've all had them. I've had an incredibly strong mentor, white woman, who was really, really influential in my career, white men also. But what I recognized early in mentorship is this interesting thing that happened. I created this whole narrative in my head about how this person wouldn't have time for me. I'm too young. They probably don't need to be bothered. They probably don't need to be cared. You know what I need to do is shut that up and say, no, I actually think that this relationship can be beneficial for both of us. But I went through a whole narrative like, okay, I didn't get my MBA. Wait a minute, I'm a biologist. This person will never be, I don't think they'll care. I created this whole thing when I could have equally said, you know what, I'm really interested in working with you and understanding how you've navigated this space and how I can benefit. But please recognize that it takes work. Don't be, I'm gonna say this because it's Black girl magic, girlfriends. It's not your time to be girlfriends with your mentor, right? Not girlfriends. You know how many times people have come to me, oh, Tim, we got along real, real good. You didn't ask me about salary negotiation. You didn't talk to me about your career. You just talked to me about good girlfriend stuff. No, that's not what I'm here to be, good girlfriends. Say that I have good girlfriends. I'm cool with that. But I want to make sure that when you are a mentor and looking for a sponsor, remember a sponsor will pull you up, a mentor will help you navigate, that you are being really clear about the purpose of that interaction. It's okay. It's okay to say, I'm going to take your time seriously. It's okay to say, I'm going to use my time wisely. I'm never mad at that. But recognize that being a mentor and having a mentor is critical because you need a constant view so that you don't have that self-talk. Because there's a lot of times in your head, you're creating a whole narrative of stuff that's not actually happening. And your mentor will say, get out of your head, step it up. Come on, Danielle, they'll say, get over yourself and push you forward. That's what a mentor can do to help you because we create a narrative about what, especially I'm in corporate and I'm in financial services. We're doing some stuff, treasurer promise, but in that space, that you've got to understand that you can create your narrative that will impact you more than any other practice or policy. If you don't think you're good enough, there's no practice or policy that's going to hurt you more than that. So get a mentor that's going to put a foot in your butt and say, you are that good, Daniela. You are that good, Shirley. Get your butt in there and ask for that. I don't care who it is, white, Puerto Rican, Indian, doesn't matter. But someone who's going to help you navigate that inner voice. So that's always what I say about mentorship, because I believe in it so firmly. And I also believe that there's an obligation for both people in that relationship to say that this is something that we're going to make of it. And if you happen to be good girlfriends because of it, all good. But it is not the purpose of it. Right? Very good. So just my little comment.
That's super helpful. That's super helpful. Danella, did you want to weigh in on that as well?
I'll just pick up on what Tammy said. The older I get, I really believe in living your life with purpose and being very intentional. And while I didn't know this years ago, when Jackie Jenkins Scott left Demick, I asked her to be my mentor, but even back then I was very clear. So to this day, I myself have two mentors, and one is a Black woman because I see myself in her. Her entire career was in nonprofit, as is mine. I really felt like this was somebody that I could learn from. Friendship came after, but I'm very deliberate even to this day with how I use her time. She tells me when I'm wrong, she tells me when I'm right, and gives me good guidance. And then my other mentor, again, I sought him out, white man. I felt like I'm in this space of philanthropy. A lot of men are the decision makers, whether or not it's corporations or what have you. So I went to this person very deliberately, and we meet 5 times a year, a Harvard Business School guy, very wealthy, where I say to him, how am I perceived as I'm going out and making these acts? So I was very intentional about who these two people are my mentors. And then I have two mentees, and a lot of people come to me and ask me to be their mentor, but I'm looking for intentionality. I'm not looking to be your mother, your sister, or your friend. I want my time to be used wisely as well. So what is it that you see? And I also appreciate you, Tammy, talking about the difference between a mentor, a sponsor, and a girlfriend. I learned from Jackie very early on, after you go to Treasurer Goldberg and you talk about the weather and offer some, then it's like, well, what do you want? You know, and how are you using people's time? So sponsor is also very different. So I would encourage those people that are asking about how do you seek or find a mentor. It's not a friend, but for me, I looked at, do I see myself in this person? Is this person successful? Is this the field? You know, because you can't, you know, if I'm a nonprofit executive, I don't per se need a political person to be my mentor, because I'm not interested in that, and that's not my trajectory. So I would say to people to be a little bit more intentional about the field, so that when you're sitting down, as Tammy says, and asking questions and having conversations, the purpose of a mentor is to impart advice and wisdom that one doesn't have. So I would say to be a little more intentional about it, so that when you go and ask someone, then it makes sense as to why you're asking them to be your mentor.
Right. Thank you. So ladies, we're running short on time. I'm so grateful to the treasurer and to Shirley and Tammy and Danella for joining us. We actually have a special guest who's going to close us out. It's Framingham Mayor Yvonne Spicer.
Yay!
Spicer is the first Black
But
woman
that is one of my
mayor
girlfriends.
by
That is a
Commonwealth
girlfriend.
in Massachusetts. And she also serves as a board member of our Economic Empowerment Trust Fund. Mayor, could you please share some words of wisdom with us? Oh no.
Oh, you're on mute.
You're muted.
You're on mute.
Perfect.
All right, now I'm unmuted. Thank you all. Thank you, sisters, for what an encouraging and inspiring conversation. And bottom line, show us the Benjamins. You know, we need to make sure we have not only our dollars and cents, but also those opportunities to climb that ladder and get in spaces that allows particularly African-American women to not only be mentored, but to, as Danella so eloquently said, to have a sponsor. And I know being an African-American woman in a science and technology engineering space that I'm in, throughout my entire professional career, I have been surrounded by white males. So, you know, it is one of those dynamics where I look and I think a lot of my professional mentors have been white males. And one in particular that I always think of him as that mentor and that sponsor that saw excellence in me and was not afraid or intimidated by it, but actually excited by it. And hence why I ended up, prior to becoming mayor, the vice president of the Museum of Science. And, you know, Dr. Giannis Mialis, he saw talent. And one of the things I can say, the museum had most of its females are in the leadership roles. And that's something I'd never seen in an organization before, where the leadership is mostly female. So having those spaces and opportunities to not only be at the table, having a seat at the table, but also look behind the curtain and see how it's done. And to be in a meeting and listen to him ask somebody for $2 million and not even flinch, you know, that was pretty profound for me. And, you know, and understanding the business of running a nonprofit organization and doing excellent things throughout the country. So as in my new space as the mayor of the city of Framingham and being the first, and as many of you are, you've been first in so many things. So, you know, it's like when somebody says you're the first, I say, I know. I just hope I'm not the last. That's really what I hope for, is that I'm not the last one. And how do I inspire other women to want to lead and be a part of governance or whatever they may want to pursue and what it means and the difference that it makes, not only for young women of color, but also as we continue to think about how do we, each one of us, lift each other up and lift as we climb. I know I'm still having a Holy Spirit moment about yesterday, and I don't know about the rest of you. I mean, you know, I shouted for a moment here, you know.
Right.
And I couldn't be happier and prouder of Kamala Harris, and you know, and once again, we lift each other up, and as the tradition of Black women, that we're connected, and we are inextricably connected. And you know, one of the things that reminds me of that connectivity is I have a Paul Goodnight in my dining room, and it's a grandmother, a mother, and a child, and all braiding each other's hair. And I think it's called Links in Lineage, and the interconnectedness, how we are so connected to our ancestors. And I don't forget that one moment in this job is that my responsibility and my rent for being on this earth is being of service to other people. So I try to do that as often as I can. And it's just been really terrific listening, and you know, and I just wanted to get in there too in the dialogue. It was just really great. So thank you all for just giving me a hot minute, and my girl Deb there. I mean, I appreciate her so much, because that is one, what I call one ally that is actively always being an anti-racist and making sure that she is raising not only women up, but particularly women of color and men of color. So I know she's puts that front and center and unabashedly works in that direction. So thank you, my sister, for always being there.
You know, I love you, Yvonne.
I love you too. I love you too. Big time. I said, you know, I'm just, I literally today, I said, you know, y'all ain't gonna steal my joy today. Nothing is gonna steal my joy today.
Kamala joy. I love it.
Yes.
Yeah, I've been prayed up and ready to go here, you know, and every day, you know, when I think about the opportunities that we have, and the opportunities that many of us have not had the opportunity to even have that door cracked. And I come back to, you know, many of our ancestors and aunties who had skills and talents that they were never able to fully realize. And now we have an opportunity, we have an obligation,
Yes.
to keep moving and also to keep bringing others along.
Yes.
Yvonne, here's to Kamala Harris being the first woman president.
From your lips to God's ears. Yeah.
Right. On that note, thank you, Mayor.
I appreciate you all so much. Thank
We
you.
appreciate you too. Thank you. Before everybody logs out, there's actually an exit poll that we'd love you to take. So if you do have a few minutes, we'd like that. And we'll see you guys again soon. Thanks so much for joining us.
Thank you.
Great to be with everybody.
Absolutely.
Alethea, thank you for being our MC.
Always happy to jump in.
Alethea, fabulous job. Thank you
Thanks,
so
team.
much.
Oh, good to see you, Danella.
You too.
Yes.
Stay well.
Daria and I are playing phone tag back and forth, but we're going to catch up with each other.
Thank you.
Wow.
Hug.
Thank you,
Bye-bye.
ladies.
Bye-bye, sweetie.